Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a Sunday edition of the Pewter Report podcast. That's right. Every other Sunday, we're doing a live Bucs mock draft. Usually it's Josh Queipo and Adam Slavon here along with the guests, but today it's yours truly, Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report. Alongside me is Josh Queipo, and today's special guest from Athlon Sports, Tampa Bay native Luke Easterling, who spent several years covering the Buccaneers and, gosh, probably a lifetime covering the NFL draft. We're excited to have him on today as we talk Bucs draft, but today with a twist. We talked about the possibility that the Buccaneers might trade up or down on Thursday's Pewter Report podcast. Now we're going to put that into action here with our live Bucs mock draft. Go through a couple scenarios. Josh Queipo will lead us into that. We'll get Luke's opinion on that plus mine. And let's start off the show today letting you know that it's presented by Briar-Greaves Insurance. That's right. Protecting your assets starts with a company you can count on with auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, and business insurance. Give Briar-Greaves a call for all of your insurance needs. You can find them on the web at briargreavesinsurance.com. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, insurance.com. Or give them a call on Monday at 813-876-4166. So let's bring in today's show participants, yours truly, Scott Reynolds, Josh Queipo, and Luke Easterling. How are you doing, Luke?
I'm doing great. Good to catch up, guys. Thanks for having me.
You still have that long flowing hair back there?
I do. It's in there.
There you go. Okay, just making sure.
It's flying around.
It's a cool head of hair, man. I love it.
I appreciate it, man.
Yep.
I feel like it's even more appropriate where you live now.
Yeah, it's definitely got a mountain man feel. I'm up in the Pacific Northwest now, so I got to grow like a full beard now and start buying North Face equipment. I don't know,
and some flannel, right? And you'll fit right in. Exactly.
Or swinging an axe. It just happens.
Well, we love the hair. We also love what's under the hair, which is your knowledge when it comes to the draft. Not just the Buccaneers, but for every team and all of their team needs. Just a couple of programming notes real quick before we get going. Myself and Josh Queipo are fervently working on the latest Pewter Report Bucs mock draft or 7-round mock draft. That will debut at 5 o'clock on pewterreport.com on Thursday, this Thursday. That's right. There's a little bit of a preview. Ooh, Malachi Starks. Look at that. As the Bucs attack the secondary. And then we're going to have a draft show live going over all of our Bucs picks on Thursday night at 8:30. Myself and Josh will be here to answer your questions, take on your comments, and get your feedback on our 4th mock draft. If you're wondering, when is the final mock draft going to come out? Well, that's going to come out Monday, April 21st. We'll have a special mock draft show that night at 8:30, just a couple days prior to the draft itself, which is on Thursday, April 26th. And we're looking forward to that as well. And so we're actually April 24th. And so we're looking to have this month of April full of draft information for you. And we wouldn't be remiss if we didn't take a look at the entire NFL landscape. And that's kind of why we have Luke Easterling in here too, looking at some teams that might be interested in doing some wheeling and dealing with the Buccaneers. Now, first of all, let's just set the table. Do we actually want the Buccaneers to trade up or trade down? Or is 19 a good spot for the team to be in, given their needs and some players that might be available?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty good spot. I think the idea of trading up is it's not my favorite. I'm not going to lie for Tampa Bay, just because of how the board typically falls. I mean, just as you guys have done at this point in the process, I've done so many different permutations of how the first round could fall. And there's very few guys, if any, that I feel like, especially for a team that only has 6 draft picks, they're already kind of, behind the ball with that. You'd like to move back more than you'd like to move up. I like the depth of the edge class. I like some of the corners that could be available there, but there's just nobody who screams like, oh man, we've got to move up for that guy. Like,
yeah,
I know Jahad Campbell is going to be part of that conversation, if only because I love him as a prospect, but I also don't love the rest of the linebacker class in the same way. So if you're talking about a separation between him and the rest of that class, I could see moving up a couple spots for a guy like that. I'm a bigger fan of Will Johnson than I think it seems a lot of people are. I think people are overthinking the kind of player he is just because he was banged up a little bit last year. Yeah. I think his 2023 film and the full strength film of 2024, he's still a top 10 talent in this draft for me. And so you're talking about filling needs and getting value.
Yeah.
You gets outside that top 10, getting closer to 15, maybe I jump ahead of Atlanta, snipe them, make sure they can't get him to pair him with Terrell and frustrate me twice a year. So the types of guys I would get interested in, but man, it's a really short list. Trading back is way more appealing to me again because of the lack of draft pick.
Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I very much agree. But kind of the impetus for the prompt that I'm giving you in terms of, and for our viewers, we are going to try and trade up in this particular scenario. It's one we really haven't done on the Sunday live mock shows yet, so I wanted to give it an opportunity. And Jason Light has said that it is something that he might be willing to do. Is it a low probability outcome? I think we all agree that's the case.
Yeah.
And then and you brought up a great point, because the Bucs only have 6 picks. It would most likely require some sort of premium given up this year.
Yeah.
Then we're going to try and do a trade back to get some extra assets later on in the draft. So I agree. There aren't many players that I think would be somebody that the Bucs would say, yeah, we absolutely have to go up. And the only evidence we have that the Bucs have done this in the past was a really good one. They gave up a 4th round draft pick in 2020 to move up all of 1 spot.
Yep.
But they got an all-pro left tackle and potentially a Hall of Famer based on the career trajectory right now in Tristan Wirfs. So, Luke, I'll put it back to you. Is there anybody in this draft you see being that good, that it may not be a 5-pick move up, it may not be a 10-pick move up, but maybe 1 or 2 picks if this guy is still on the board? And then I'm going to give you a little hedge when we actually get into it. If that guy goes before, say, 16 or 17, then at 19 we can just stick and pick. But who would you identify as these are the guys that, yeah, I'd be willing to give up a little bit of a premium to go get them?
I mean, the short answer is no. If Tristan Wirfs is the baseline here, I don't think there's a Tristan Wirfs that's going to be available there. I love that the Bucs had 2 4th-round picks in that draft. They traded them both, one to move up 1 spot for Tristan Wirfs, and the other one to the Patriots for the right to lure Rob Gronkowski out of retirement. So nice use of those 2 4th-round picks, Jason.
For sure.
Well done. No, I think those are the 2 guys I mentioned. I think Will Johnson being a shutdown corner with the size, the length, and everything that you look for to fit in Todd Bowles' defense, and the fact that you're hoping Zion McCollum continues to make the strides and become that type of player. Jamel Dean, at this point in his career, he's probably a bargain at the rate he's made, at the money he's making compared to what the rest of the league goes, but I don't know if he has any guaranteed money left on that deal, and how, I think he only has 1 year left. And so you've got to plan beyond that. I actually wouldn't be opposed to double dipping at corner in this draft, just because the depth needs so much help as well. You got to guard against making sure guys like Josh Hayes and Funderburk and those guys don't have to be on the field in a playoff game, trying to guard Terry McLaurin with the game.
Or any game, maybe outside of special.
Yeah, that's any game, but particularly in the playoffs against Scary Terry. Terry was more scary against those guys. You don't want that happening in the playoffs. But no, I mean, those are the 2 guys. Campbell and Johnson, I think, would be the guys that have the potential, not just in a vacuum in terms of how I love them as prospects, but particularly for the Bucs where they are. Campbell obviously being that immediate upgrade at the other off-ball linebacker spot, and also the long-term, once – I know we don't like to think about life without Levante David after 14 years, but it's going to happen at some point. You want to have a seamless transition to that guy. So those are the 2 guys that really would get me out of my seat to maybe be bold and make a move. But past that, man, I feel like 19 is a great spot. And even moving down, I'd feel a lot more comfortable targeting the rest of that corner group, the rest of that edge group, adding another day 2 pick to address the linebacker group, which I think there'll be some value in that range. That's kind of what my mind would be thinking.
So before we get going, let me just ask you, since we talked about Jihad Campbell here, he waited until after the combine, which was smart because he ran a really good 40-yard dash time, right? And he did, I think, the vertical jump or the broad jump, something to that effect, and did the on-field drills. And then after that, so call it mid-March, he did surgery. He had surgery on his torn labrum in his shoulder. Yep. That is typically a 6 to 8 month recovery, right? So optimistic if you target that at 6 months and say, all right, let's take a look at this. Then he misses all of the OTAs, all of the mini camps, misses training camp, probably misses the preseason as well. And then he's right around that optimistic time at 6 months to possibly get on the field in some form or fashion, special teams to begin with or whatever, in September. 8 months puts that recovery window. Now you're looking into October, maybe early November, before your first round pick sees the field. We know that the Todd Bowles defense is complex. He has said cornerback is the easiest position to learn. Linebacker is not so much the easiest position to learn, yet we saw Devin White start at linebacker next to Levante David. David erased a lot of his mistakes early on. But at the same time, Devin White was there for the rookie minicamp, the OTAs, the minicamp, training camp, and the preseason to learn this system. Mm-hmm. And so then, when he stepped on the field in 2020 and actually didn't even play, he missed a couple of games right at the beginning. He got hurt in Carolina, but had a pretty good rookie season and then a very good 2020 season. Is there any trepidation for the Buccaneers to draft Jihad Campbell, understanding that he's not going to master this system by any means in year one and might not even be ready to play in week one? Is there enough confidence that Servassier Dennis and Levante David can hold down the fort until Jihad Campbell comes in?
Yeah, I don't love it. I'm not going to lie. It's definitely part of the equation. And I think it's particularly probably, it's problematic for the Bucs in that you're already relying on a guy in Servassier Dennis that's coming off a shoulder injury that,
right.
Is already, and again, that, not quite apples to apples because Servassier is kind of an undersized guy and Jihad Campbell is anything but undersized. So you're hopeful there'll be some durability there. But I agree with everything you said. All of those concerns are present, which is, again, why I just don't love the idea of trading up. But if he's there at 19, I think it's a good conversation to have, just because, yes, you're a contending team and you need people who are going to make an impact immediately. But if I'm choosing genuinely between the best player on my board, who I think is really what we need, not just eventually this year, but 2-3 years down the line, and I really feel convicted about that player, obviously the team doctors are going to come into that. Their evaluation of that process for our team and my trust in that group of people is going to matter a lot, I think. So yeah, it's got to be part of the conversation. And it's why not just that, but just overall on my board, Will Johnson is higher up. And so I think if both of them are on the board in that range, or both of them are at 19, I would go Johnson, and the injury for Campbell would have a lot to do with that.
Josh, your thoughts?
So I think I've been pretty public, and I am not that high on Jihad Campbell, not as high nearly as anyone else. This was before the injury. He's not even linebacker one on my board. And I actually just heard, I think probably the best comp for me, like, I'm not great at comps in general, but the bootleg,
I hate them.
The bootleg boys, I was listening to them yesterday, and they had one for him, and they said Kyle Van Noy, in terms of like usage and how to get the most out of him. I think Campbell's absolutely a more athletic version of Kyle Van Noy, but I love in terms of how they would be effective, how they would be used. And for me, like even 19, not even trading up, but even at 19, I'm reluctant to use that type of draft capital on a Kyle Van Noy type. The one who was in Miami, Andrew Van Ginkel, they kind of classified him in that, where he's very much hybrid, probably gets a lot of his effectiveness off the edge. I've even on record as saying, I think that down the line, you may see Campbell. I think his best reps are actually as an edge defender. And I could see him making some type of transition like a Baron Browning, or even
like Micah Parsons.
Similar. Where, although with Micah, he would have been fine as an inside linebacker. Like, he would have been very good. He was just much better as an edge. I think with Campbell, it may be eventually, it's just not working out at linebacker. Let's move him to edge, like with Browning. So I love the Campbell. Campbell's one of the highest cornerbacks on my list. I would be willing to move up for him. So I like that idea. So I think it'll be very interesting as we go through this mock draft, whether we get to the point where we just scrap it. I'm fine with that. I'm not this dictatorial person who's going to say, no, we must do it for somebody we don't like. But I wanted to at least explore the option and see how that might play out in a draft format.
Sure. Let's get to it. I will say this, a couple of notable Jason Light trade ups. You already mentioned, I think his best trade ever, right? In terms of getting Tristan Wirfs by trading up one spot. But Jason Light has also traded up notably a couple of other times. He traded up in the second round, 3 spots to get Luke Gedeke, right? That was a good trade. Also traded up to get Ali Marpet in the second round back in 2015. That was a very good trade as well. Also traded up for Roberto Aguayo in the second round. I don't think anybody would classify that as a good trade, an average trade. That was one of the absolute worst trades of all time. So some hits, some misses for Jason Light. Hopefully, if he does decide to trade up, it's not, a Herculean leap. And I guess
one of the interesting things, Scott,
Yeah.
and I think we don't talk about enough, and I don't know if you heard this, but I had kind of heard rumblings back when they traded up for Wirfs that it wasn't just about getting up one spot. It was who was trying to get there too. And I think that Atlanta was rumored to be very, very excited about the idea of Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah,
and the Bucs
and also
made
the
that
49. What did they trade up with the 49ers?
They traded with the 49ers
Yeah, right.
to move up one spot.
It was, yeah.
And the
And
49ers then went and got Trent Williams, if I remember correctly. That's why they were comfortable losing out on Tristan. That worked out well for both teams.
Worked out for both sides, yeah. And Tristan Wirfs is not a Falcon, which is a good, very, very good thing.
Yes, exactly. And the Falcons continue to Falcon to this day.
We love it.
We'll see how Michael Penix fares for them this year. All right, so let's get going with our mock draft simulator. We'll get this off the screen here. There we go. And we're ready to roll, Josh, if you want to play Draft Master here and get us going with the simulator.
Let's see. Here we go. So we're going to be at pick 19. We're going to do a 7 round. We're going to start the speed off fairly slow.
Okay.
And I think the rest of it looks pretty good. So we're going to enter the draft here. All right. So we're keeping an eye on Jihad Campbell and Will Johnson. All right. So here we go. And I should probably find, there's the pause button. Okay. So far, we look pretty, Campbell just went off the board at 11.
Okay.
I don't think Bucs trading up to 11 would be any type of a reasonable move.
No, and that kind of makes me feel better. Like if I know, again, what Scott said about the injury and that sort of thing, I don't have to have that conversation anymore. And I wasn't trading up to 10 anyway. So, that kind of makes me feel good that I wouldn't have made that move in the first place. And now I don't have to have that conversation with myself about the injury, even at 19.
Yeah.
So we'll keep going.
And certainly, I was going to say, and so Jihad Campbell goes to the 49ers, and that's a good fit because they need to replace Dre Greenlaw and get somebody to pair inside with Fred Warner.
Yeah. And then, so now we've got just the one other player that you've identified, Will Johnson. I don't think 15 is reasonable because typically interdivision trades are not common. So do we freeze at 14 and start to consider moving up to 14 with the Colts, or do we wait till after Atlanta picks and then look at 16 with the Cardinals before we freeze again and then start to have that conversation?
I think it can't hurt to freeze at 14 and see what happens.
Let's check it out.
Okay. So he is still available. Will Johnson.
No, Will Campbell just went.
Will Johnson.
Yeah, Will Campbell.
I'm sorry. Yes.
It's a good thing we don't. It's a good thing we don't have a prospect in this class named Jihad Johnson.
I know exactly.
We would be
sorry,
screwed. Yeah,
I'm getting in a warp with like Ryan Neal and Keanu Neal and Logan Ryan.
Oh my gosh, that was
Neil
that was
Diamond.
Yeah.
It's they're all over the place.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So,
Will Johnson is the cornerback we're looking at from Michigan. Yes.
Yep. So just to see, could we move from 19 to 14 by just giving up a 4th rounder? No. According to the PFF simulator, it would require pick 84, which would be the Bucs' 3rd rounder, which would leave them with 1st, 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 7th.
So what I like to do in these scenarios
me too.
is what can they kick back to me to make sure I've got the same amount of bodies coming back into the building.
I agree.
And so if I've got to give up a pick that's higher than I want, especially when I see 90% there, as far as the acceptance, that's what I like to see. It nibble at the edges. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
So if we get 117 back, we're effectively just trading back around.
Right.
And it still has a 65% chance to be accepted.
Will they give us a 6 or a 7 so I can get 7 draft picks?
Yeah. Try for a 7th.
7th? 64% didn't change it much.
Yeah.
I would do it for Will Johnson just because I think there's a gap between him and the rest of this corner class. Everybody after that, bigger questions. I like Siobhan Revelle at full strength. But coming off the knee injury, you have to have that conversation. I like a lot of day 2 corners. I think Darian Porter is a Bucs corner.
Love Porter.
Lot of similarities to Zion McCollum, converted receiver, ridiculous athlete, still learning the position, but big, long, super athletic. I think he'd be a great fit there. But Will Johnson, again, like I said, top 10 player on my board at a premium position and a guy that I can plug in and be. I mean, he could easily be immediately the Bucs' best corner, and I think that's huge.
So let me ask you this, right? Because with Will Johnson, some of the question is, right, he missed the second half of the season with turf toe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got a hamstring injury that prevented him from testing at the pro day and the combine. He'll have his own workout there. Are you concerned if by that pro day, that his individual workout, if that hamstring is still in effect? And sometimes we've seen how agents like to use the hamstring injury when they don't want a guy to have a 40-yard dash time. Are you concerned at all by that, by either the turf toe injury or by not getting an actual time on him? Or are you comfortable with these teams using, catapult and these different ways to look at film and get a mile per hour speed on a player without having to get a 40-yard dash time on a stopwatch?
Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit to that data where you can get a much better idea of play speed than you can, I'm much more interested in what a guy does with pads on between the lines than what he does on the track. Staying banged up is a concern because I'm trying to get him to replace Jamel Dean, who can't stay healthy. So that's the big thing for me. Typically, I like my corners to be a little tougher in run support. And so that's really the biggest knock I have against him. I just think at the end of the day, you have to be able to cover and do that at a high level first and worry about the rest later. Right. And so that's why I still think if he can avoid the injuries, he can be a special player, and he wouldn't be anywhere near the 14th overall pick if he hadn't gotten banged up. He was the number 3 overall player on my board coming into this season. And so I just, the upside, the importance of the position, and the fact that we're trading back around and adding a pick. So we're really, I feel like we're coming out ahead and addressing the most immediate big need on our defense. I think that's why it's still leaned that way.
Yep. And to that point, I want to point out the proposed trade we have here. I was looking at the Jimmy Johnson chart, which is widely still the chart that NFL teams use, even though it's kind of been proven to be a little too top heavy. And this trade proposal comes out in the Bucs' favor to the tune of picking up the same value as a 4th round pick. So to that point, they are coming out ahead based on this proposed trade. I don't know if this trade would go off in real life. I don't know if Indianapolis would accept it, but we can work off of PFF saying that it would. Are we ready to offer the trade?
Let's do it. We're jumping ahead of Atlanta, too, for a player that they might be targeting here, too.
That's
so pissing them off makes me happy as well.
Very Tristan Wirfs-like.
Yeah.
So there we go. It was accepted, and we are now on the clock, and Will Johnson is 3rd overall on this board, 1st on yours. So we'll go ahead and make that pick. And with it, I'm going to increase the speed of the draft a little bit. So we get to the Bucs' 2nd rounder at 53. And then here, I had said, well, if we're trading up in the 1st, we can trade back in the 2nd, but we already picked up some additional draft assets. I don't know if that's necessarily required. Why don't we just take a look at the board and see if we prefer to trade? Although Revel is there.
Yeah.
Go corner right off the bat.
I'll do it. I swear I will do it.
Yeah, given the injuries that this team has had, you could never have enough good cornerbacks for sure. And what you're doing is you have a safety net built into this draft at the cornerback position, like you double dipped to get Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean back in 2019. You do that again, and I like the fortitude at this position now, where you legitimately have 3 starting caliber cornerbacks, 4 if you keep Jamel Dean on this team. But now what this allows you to do is create some more cap room, maybe trade Dean after the draft if you wanted to, or just hang on to him as the experienced guy while you make sure that one of these 2 guys, Savon Revel or Will Johnson, can come in and start for you. And so that would be a huge win for the Buccaneers. I know that they needed an edge. They need an inside linebacker. Who else is available? Demetrius Knight is available as well. That would be an interesting pick as well.
Bucs had on a top 30 visit, if I remember correctly, Darian Porter, who we already talked about. Omar Norman Lott, who can create more pass rush up the middle, would be very interesting from my perspective. I'm a big CJ West fan, although a different type of defensive tackle. He'd be somebody to kind of long-term replace Greg Gaines as your backup nose.
Real quick, Josh, Luke, I want to get your thoughts real quick. A thumbnail sketch on both of these guys: Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, the corner, and also Josiah Stewart, the edge from Michigan, who wasn't among your top 10 edge rushers, Josh. And I tend to agree with you on that. But what are your thoughts on both of those players?
Yeah, so with Morrison, you've got to go back to 2023 tape with him, because you got the hip injury pretty early in the year and you didn't get to see a ton of him. But man, if you go back to that 2023 tape, it's teach tape. I mean, he's so technically sound. I hate comparing guys to Hall of Famers, but I try to do it as a prospect, because a lot of these Hall of Fame prospects weren't necessarily elite guys coming out, and so when you look at his size and length and just the way he uses his technique and his intelligence, he looks so much like Darrelle Revis coming out of Pitt, where he wasn't the fastest, most explosive guy in the world, but man, he stayed so sticky because of his footwork, because of his physicality, his length. He knew how to use his tools so well. So if you go back to the 2023 tape, Benjamin Morrison is fun to watch. I think the big thing, particularly with a corner dealing with a hip injury in terms of your transition, your fluidity, that's going to be a huge question mark for me. And why, again, that he's not a first round pick, he's second round pick. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I'm a huge fan.
Before you move to Stewart, though, regarding Morrison, if you don't mind, watching his tape prior to that injury, I had personally, this is just me, I had concerns about the hip fluidity just before that. Did you have similar concerns, or is all of your concerns regarding hip fluidity just tied to the injury?
I mean, I think anytime you have a taller, more high cut guy like he is, hip fluidity is always going to be a challenge, I would say. Guys like him will have to work harder to sink and transition than, guys that are 5'10" and 190. It's just that's just physics. And so you've got to understand that that's the reality. And also you've got to have your DB coach earn his money too. You've got to get the tools in the building and make your money as a coach to improve those transitions, to improve the footwork and the technique. And so it's not a big enough issue for me. It's a sliding scale. It's like a 40-yard dash, right? If you run a 4.6, that's not impressive if you're 180 pounds. It's super impressive if you're 260. And so, for him, there's a certain level of fluidity I know you're probably not going to get as you're going to get from some of the smaller guys. But for a guy his size, I thought it was adequate enough for me to get the rest of what he brings to the table.
Okay, that's fair. And then your thoughts on Josiah Stewart?
I'm not going to lie. He's like my favorite third roundish edge. I think, athletic enough, explosive enough, productive at Coastal Carolina before he transferred. And when you transfer from a smaller school, you're still productive at a higher program. And then you earn the captaincy at a place like Michigan. That's the biggest thing that stands out to me. Reminds me a lot of Shaq Barrett, the way he plays. An undersized guy, but that uses his tools well. And you're going to add him to a locker room and immediately have a leader immediately. I mean, go talk to the people in that program. Talk about just in a short time he was there. He wasn't a 4-year guy at Michigan, but quickly earned the respect of that locker room, quickly became a guy that they talk about as a coach on the field, a guy that takes younger guys under his wing. I think he could be a very, very effective, situational pass rusher right away with some upside to be a Shaq Barrett type of player in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I've seen some of the, not criticism, but like some of the debate about Josiah Stewart. And they're saying, well, he's next to Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. I mean, those two are going to make you look good, right? And maybe it was a collection of the sum rather than like the individual part. But at the same time, with that same logic, it becomes the Tampa. He's playing next to Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, right? So the same kind of logic applies there that, okay, well, if he needs two good defensive tackles to really kind of shine, well, Tampa Bay's got two very good defensive tackles.
It's also like a chicken and the egg thing too. Like you don't get to pick who you play next to. Like
right.
you don't, you want to make him, put him on a team whose interior line sucks and see if he still produces it. Like he plays where he plays. And so, again, it does. If you're Tampa Bay, you're not worried about that. But if you're any other team, it's like, okay, he did his job. He did what he was supposed to do. We can't invent a scenario in which we see whether or not he would have done so with a more lackluster supporting cast. And again, go back to the production he had at Coastal Carolina. He didn't have those guys at Coastal. He was a record-setting guy. Right. He had a single-season sack record there. So that part doesn't worry me at all. It's the same thing it's a scout the player, not the helmet adjacent type of thing to me, where it's like, oh, they had all this talent around him at Texas and Alabama. Like, okay, you don't get to pick who you play against. You don't get to pick who you play with and who you play for. That's why, again, this is always going to be an art and not a science. And so you do have to try to isolate the player as much as possible. Does it depend on a lot of other factors? Of course, but we're trying to pinpoint as best we can. And when you do that with Stewart, I just think there's way more to like than I'm going to be worried that he played, alongside really good players.
Good stuff.
Now, I've filtered here for just all the defensive positions. Are there any offensive players, Luke, that you would be interested in at around 53 for the Bucs that you would like me to go and take a look? Are they still available?
No, I think, there are receivers that could leak through to the top of the second, but I did, Abuka and Burden and those types of guys that if they were early there and I was picking early in the second, that makes sense as a luxury pick kind of thing. But no, I think, especially since Siobhan Revell is staring me in the face and I know I'm not going to do anything other than take him. I just, if we're doubling up at corner, we got to know.
To my next question here, which is because of the trade, Bucs don't pick again until the 4th. There are a few linebackers we mentioned tonight. Schwessinger, who I would say is probably the best blitzer in this class. And then Chris Paul, who is my linebacker one. Are there any thoughts here of taking them just given the draft situation of not having a third rounder versus just the upside of Savon Revel?
Yeah, I mean, there's a conversation to be had, but that immediately red flags pop up in my mind. Like I'm reaching for need as opposed to taking the best football player for the next 3 to 5 years and not just trying to fill that immediate need at linebacker. I also don't think there's a massive gap for me between this tier of linebacker with Paul and Knight and Schwessinger and the next tier with guys like Jeffrey Bassa, guys like Barrett Carter. I don't see a massive enough gap there. And also, again, if I have to add depth and then go into next year and knowing I need to address the linebacker position, playing linebacker in the NFL, there was a really long tweet from Brett Coleman. I don't know if you guys follow Brett, who does a lot of great film stuff. Yeah. But he had a great tweet about why it's really challenging for off-ball linebackers in the modern NFL to translate quickly. And so
RPO game.
Yeah, it's the RPO game. It's the hash marks. Yeah. It's so much of the responsibilities are so different at the next level. And so if the reason I would take Chris Paul Jr. here, or Schwessinger, or anybody, is because I need a linebacker to make an immediate impact for this team. Right. I need veterans to do that. And so I would rather take the best prospect for the next 2, 3, 4 years in Revell and address a very important premium position, go in the next offseason and spend at linebacker a little bit more, get guys who have played in the NFL for 4 years and don't have to be taught certain things. They're already there to a certain extent. I'd feel much more comfortable doing that. If that's something I need to address more immediately, that's how I'd prefer to do it, as opposed to not taking a guy like Revell, who I think was a top 15 prospect in this class before he got hurt. And
Right.
I think ACL injuries aren't what they used to be. I'm more confident in the guy being able to bounce back from that.
Sounds like you're describing a guy like Anthony Walker.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Walker is a guy who elevates the floor of the position, which I think is very important. I think, I would be talking about more like making a little bit more of a splash than the Bucs usually, making like a Hassan Reddick type signing at linebacker.
And the other thing too, to your point, Luke, is you draft the linebacker on day 3, right? And hope that you hit on a guy like Bucky Irving, like a day 3 steal, or a Zion McCollum. So you've got a day 3 guy in SirVocea Dennis that you live with this year. Maybe he blossoms. Maybe he's just a guy. We'll wait and see. But you draft a guy this year and on day 3, and if he pans out, then great, problem solved. If not, then you 1-2 punch it next year. Maybe Levante's back, maybe he's not, but you go out and you get that premium linebacker in free agency, and then you draft another one, right? Because you're going to need 2 linebackers. Yep. And you can address it that way. Then you still have SirVocea Dennis will be in a contract year next year in 2026, and the other linebacker that you drafted this year in the hopper to contend with.
And you've got Will Johnson and Siobhan Revell going into their second season in Todd Bowles' defense. You've got McCollum continuing to grow. I like
do the pick. I like it. Let's go with Siobhan Revell. Here we go.
Siobhan Revell. There we go. Do we want to trade back up into the 3rd round? I'm going to slow this down just to ask that question. Is there any thoughts of doing that for either one of you, or do we just want to roll to 117?
I say we roll to 117. We're at 36 minutes in. So let's see
how the linebackers.
We've done enough wheeling and dealing so far.
Fair enough.
Jason
just pointing up the options.
So, yeah.
All right, here we go. So we've got 2 4th rounders fairly close to each other. We still filtering just for defense?
We still need a linebacker.
We definitely need a linebacker.
Corners. All right,
I will say that this is a very sweet spot for interior defensive linemen as well.
Yeah, it is.
To address
see if there's any value picks there.
I'm going to introduce a position group just because I think after the number 1, there's a lot of projection, and that's tight end. So I want to just kind of put that in there.
Sure. Also put wide receiver. Let's see if there's a value wide receiver, a guy that maybe is a true day 2 guy that slips.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to safety here either, depending on who's there.
Safety.
Another position similar to corner where if anybody goes down, you're in trouble with what's behind them there.
Well, and also too, I don't think Revell, because he's 6'2", he's not the ideal inside guy. Will Johnson, could he play inside at all? Or
he can. I think he can move inside of this line. He's a follow guy. He's a guy that if all these premier receivers, they line up all over the place at this point, and they try to isolate them on nickel corners when they can. But I think he's a guy who can follow.
Okay.
Luke, I want to ask you about.
I'm just looking away if I can get Revell and McCollum and Johnson on the field at the same time. I think
that would be 100%. I think you can do that all day long.
Okay.
Yep. Luke, I'd like to ask you about somebody who I just kind of scrolled by here because he seems to be the player of the week on social media. Your thoughts on Kyle Williams out of Washington State?
Big fan. I've always just been a random Washington State fan. Like I just like Washington State for some reason. I don't understand why. I just pretty uniforms, maybe. I don't know.
Gardner Minshew.
I don't know. All the way back in the day, just Marcus Trufant years of Washington State football. For some, I think I played with them in like an old video game, and you know how it works.
Yeah.
You just latch onto a team.
Start to fall in love. Yep.
That's just the way it is. So no, Kyle Williams is great, man. I think he's a very high floor receiver. There's not like one trait that jumps out, but he just does everything really, really well. And so he's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy, but I think he's a strong route runner. Great at the catch point for being not a super huge guy. I get really annoyed when people assume that if you're not 6'3 plus, you're not a great contested catch guy.
Yeah.
Watch Jalen Knoll from Iowa State if you don't think that's a
for
thing.
Sure.
But no, Kyle Williams, again, very well-rounded prospect. And he's prospect of the week for a reason. I think people are coming around to the fact that there's really not a glaring, he can't do this at a pretty high level in his game.
Right.
Like him.
Now, you'd asked how linebacker fell, and it looks like Cody Simon, Cody Lindenberg, and Danny Stutzman lead this particular draft board. I'll
scroll up a little. I think you're down a little.
Did I miss somebody? Oh, that's right. So Kobe King, and
Barrett Carter
Jack-
is the
Jack
guy that
Carter.
stands out to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like Barrett Carter. I don't love him. I don't. He does a lot of things well. Is he special? I don't know, but at the same time, he's athletic, and maybe he's a guy that you take a chance on here. I think there's good value in the 4th round for Barrett Carter for sure.
Yeah,
That's really where I'm pointing there, and because I think there's more depth along the interior. I love Caldwell and I love JJ Pegues here as well, but I'm more confident that one of those guys is still going to be there here in a few picks, and I think the gap between Carter and even a guy like Kaiser is significant to me. I think his athleticism, again, 4th round pick, get him in the building with this defense without the pressure to have to start right away. Get him in the building with guys like Levante, Anthony Walker, those veteran guys, and let him work with his coaching staff and develop. And maybe he's that guy next year that keeps you from having to spend a bunch of money in free agency.
How about the Oklahoma linebacker, Danny Stutzman? We're having some people on the boards freaking out because he's there.
Yeah, I think he's a really fun player.
Yeah.
That if you love college football, you understand why a lot of people love him. He's a great playmaker. Yeah. I don't think he's on the same level as an athlete, as a potential 3-down player as a guy like Carter is.
Right.
I wouldn't hate it, but I there's a gap there for me between those two players.
Let's go with Barrett Carter.
All right. And I think that was really prescient because the 3 teams that pick after this, before the Bucs' next pick, all have linebacker needs. So
that's a great point. Yeah, agree.
Drafting.
We'll continue to piss the Falcons off.
I like that.
All right, and now we're back. If we hadn't taken 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 picks, Kobe Bryant would be somebody I would be absolutely trying to move in on right here. But
let's just set the position up for the next 5 years. Let's just go Kobe Bryant.
We will not need a corner, damn it.
That's right.
All right.
No more excuses for the Bucs secondary.
None at all.
I'll be honest. The names that have jumped out at me so far, scrolling through this, Billy Bowman.
Yes,
and then,
that was going to be the name I said.
Yeah.
The other one I'd love to take a shot at here.
Scroll up a little bit, Josh, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the top.
Would be Benjamin Urasek, the tight end out of Georgia, because I think the promise there, not a lot of tape. I think there's some injury history there. But the athleticism, I think that he can work in line.
Scrolling down now.
If you talk about who in this range has the best shot at developing into a starter, I would actually probably bet on him over a lot of these other names we're seeing here.
I don't know that the Bucs.
Can I pick Willie Lampkin just because I love Willie
for fun?
Lampkin?
Just for fun, absolutely.
It's your world. Like Antoine Powell Ryland out of Virginia Tech. I think he's Donovan Ezraku light. He's just not as athletic. If you're looking for an extra edge guy, his tape is really fun to watch. Blue collar, high effort guy. I liked him. Brashard Smith out of SMU. They don't need a running back, but my gosh, he's a big time guy on my board that's just fun to watch.
There's a couple of fun running backs here. Yeah. I like Bashal Tutin's still there. Jaden Blue's still there. If you're just like pure speed playmaker, get the ball in that guy's hands. I think those guys would be fun. I don't think for the Bucs it's too much of a consideration. I'm really sad that both of those interior guys went off the board. That's the risk you take when you go.
Is Tonka Hemingway still on the board?
Yeah, I like Tonka. I think his name is Tonka. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Nah, he might actually be on the board. Let's see.
If you're a defensive lineman named Tonka, you're going to go up the board. That's just the rules.
Yeah.
Let's see. Defensive lineman. He is still on the board.
That's
intriguing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. This is
I'll ask you guys this.
I'll ask you guys. This is 4th round. Okay.
I'm going to ask you guys this. At what point do the Bucs have a conversation about some of these quarterbacks on day 3? As a future backup. I mean, you got Will Howard on the board. I don't know if Kyle.
They don't like Will Howard. There. They don't like him. I like him, but they don't like him. I know that person.
I mean, he's I've got a 5th on him. I think he's okay. Yeah. I mean, all these guys are Jags to me. Like they're just guys. But is there anybody? McCord is the guy actually.
Kyle McCord for me.
Yeah, I mean it's all it is.
I don't think the Louisville kid's going to be there in the 4th round, right? He's more of a day 2 guy.
I wouldn't think so. That's why I didn't mention him. I saw him there and I was like, that's not happening.
Yeah, that's not realistic.
So I don't see any of these guys developing into anything special. And so you can find backup quarterbacks for about $1 million The Bucs literally did that by re-signing Kyle Trask and actually got a discount on the contract due to the veteran salary benefit. And
because Greeny is a genius.
Yeah. And I know that they're pretty high on Pratt as a developmental guy. So
I am too. I'm not going to lie.
Like if I were to put Pratt against these guys, like let's say Pratt's in this draft, where does he rank?
I had a 3 on Pratt last year.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so you've got him above what, all of these guys? I wouldn't have.
So you answered my question for me with my own rankings. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Appreciate that. Thank you. The answer is no. Got it.
The answer is no. So if Shuck could not freak out every time there's the possibility of pressure, maybe it's a different conversation. But outside of that,
how about wide receivers? Let's just take a quick peek at those because we're looking at at wide receiver 4
Williams
for this
still
year.
On the board. I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
I like Torrey Horton. I like some of these guys a good bit, but Kyle Williams.
Pat Bryant as a is like a possession type guy. Kind of reminds me
big slot
of Juwan Jennings a little bit out in San Francisco.
Yep, I could see that. No, I love Kyle Williams again.
Yeah,
super high floor guy.
I like it.
Let's put a smile on Josh Grizzard's face, shall we?
Yeah.
New offensive
coordinator. There we go. He's happy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
He's
Chris.
happy.
We
All right.
We got something for you.
All right.
All righty. So let's look at. We've taken a linebacker. We haven't taken a safety yet. We haven't taken an edge yet. I'm going to leave tight end because I haven't gotten deep into the tight ends, but I've heard it's a good draft for them.
Yeah.
Real quick, it's better than I thought it was.
We have people kind of joining the show here. So just to recap, if you join the show late, so you don't have to watch it from the beginning, we'd love for you to. But first pick, we traded up because that's kind of the theme today is looking at possible trade ups for Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, traded up ahead of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yep.
Second round, we went corner again with Savon Ravel out of East Carolina. And there was no third round pick. The fourth round pick was Barrett Carter, and then now Kyle Williams. So now we've got 2 corners, a linebacker, and got a wide receiver for Josh Grizzard.
Gave up the third rounder, but picked up the extra 4th rounder, which we used, I want to say, on Carter. And we've also picked up an extra 7th rounder that we'll use a little bit later on. So now kind of coming back to it. Filtered for tight end, interior offensive line, safety, interior defensive line, and edge. Is there anything else you want me to add or take away as we kind of scroll through here? Tonka Hemingway is still on.
Hemingway's there.
We just want to go with it?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Tonka it is. So now we will move past the 6th round. And we get 2 7ths. Take some flyers on.
Love those lottery tickets.
Yep.
Get a head start on your undrafted free agency.
That's exactly what it is. Because Jason Light can't really draft 7th rounders. I think Devin Culp is probably going to be his best chance at really hitting on a 7th round with any meaningful player.
Yep.
But listen, if you're a general manager and your weakness is 7th round, then you're doing something right.
You're doing all right. Yeah.
The guy that jumps out to me right away as we're talking about Jason Light's patterns is Ty Robinson, a defensive lineman from where?
Nebraska.
Yeah. Athletic. Super athletic guy that I think could make a lot of. If we hadn't just taken an interior guy, I would be much more on the board here for Ty Robinson. I think he would be a Jason Light pick.
Can you start at the top of the 7th round here, Josh?
Absolutely.
Or the very top list, and then go down. Okay, so all right.
Craig Woodson, Ty Robinson, Smile Mountain Jr. The Bucs have had a formal.
Not opposed to double dipping at linebacker.
Agreed.
And had a while. Testing really well in terms of an athlete, which means he'd probably be solid on special teams.
Yep.
So we like
linebackers have to do everything, man.
He's a heady player.
Have to do everything.
Yep.
High football IQ. So.
All right. So we'll lock that one in.
Yep. Let's go. Smile Mountain.
Love that.
Okay.
I think Trevor's finally updated his board and taken Teddy Buchanan out of this range, and that makes me sad because he's always a go-to 7th round.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
Wow, Jordan
Luke, I'd love to
Hancock.
get your opinion on Jordan Hancock because I'm a huge fan.
Me
I
too.
don't think he's a 7th rounder. Maybe he's an early day 3 guy.
He's a great
I'm very,
nickel.
very high on him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the play for me because it gives you the versatility to let Tyke Smith do whatever you want him to.
Yeah.
Whether you move him, they can be interchangeable in those ways. So if one of those guys get injured or somebody gets injured and somebody has to take over the slot role, somebody can fill in the safety. I like that pick a lot, especially this late.
Okay. All right. So we will lock that in as our final pick of the draft that we forced Luke to trade up in.
I am a lot happier with this draft than I thought I was
too.
going to be.
It really worked out
forced
well.
to trade up. Yeah,
I know.
So just to kind of recap for everybody, we did trade up from 19 to 14. We gave up a 3rd rounder, picked up a 4th and a 7th in exchange. And we were able to get somebody who's a top 10 player on Luke Easterling's board in Michigan corner Will Johnson, who should immediately upgrade both the floor and the ceiling of the Bucs corner room. Then double dipped at corner in the 2nd round, increasing the opportunity at the ceiling for that corner room with East Carolina's Savon Ravel, potentially the best athlete in the draft. 4th round took linebacker Barrett Carter out of Clemson. And then also Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams to help insulate against Mike Evans's age and Chris Godwin's recovery from ankle surgery. Then in the 5th round, Tonka Hemingway to give some depth at the interior defensive line. And then in the 7th, a couple of dart picks on some big program guys. Smile Mondon Jr. out of Georgia, and then Jordan Hancock, the safety out of Ohio State. Interestingly enough, I don't know about for either one of you, this is the first mock draft that I think I've done for the Bucs where did not touch edge. Did not touch edge at all. So I don't know if that's the same for both of you, but
me as well.
I mean, the interesting thing, it's hard to look at that and say, oh my gosh, could that happen? But also, if you look at the roster the way it is now, there's not a lot, like it's not a wide open, there's not a wide open spot in that group after bringing back Nelson and signing Reddick, and you've got Braswell, you're hoping to take a next step. You've got Yaya, you've already got some young guys in Ramirez and Watts. Is Watts still there?
Yeah, Watts is still there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's not unthinkable to me looking at the roster the way it is for them to go into this and think, oh my God, I've got to get another edge, especially if they don't get one early. If you don't get Ezeraku in the 1st or something like that, like don't get one super early, or a guy like Stewart again in the 3rd. It's not a position where I could see them throwing a dart at the wall on day 3 because they've already got those guys in the building.
Totally agree. Yeah, I'm with you. And I think the other thing too is, and I've said it, and I believe it. Huge Larry Foote fan, right? And Larry Foote coached that position 2019, 2020, 2021. You had Carl Nassib there for a year. You had Shaq Barrett in his first year in Tampa. You had Jason Pierre-Paul, who'd been there since 2018 as well, and got the absolute most out of those guys, right? And the interesting thing is Foote was an inside linebacker in the NFL. But I think Mike Caldwell coached the position better. You look at Devin White's production and Levante David and what they were able to get out of that position. And I just think Foote, even though he never played edge rusher, he is such a hands-on guy that he got the most out of that unit. And I thought George Edwards was a huge disappointment over the last couple of years. I'm excited to see what he can do as the pass game coordinator. I think he's better there than a position coach. But Larry Foote, with that group that you mentioned, right, which is kind of status quo outside of the addition of Hassan Reddick, let's see what happens with Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts if these guys can be an effective outside linebacker 5 for this room. And Anthony Nelson's back, Chris Braswell, the development there that I think could and should happen, and Yaya Diaby, and then you got Reddick leading the room. I mean, you would think this draft would be a failure without an edge. Maybe you could buy with it for a year and just let some of your existing talent develop under Larry Foote and cross your fingers that he's the kingmaker that I think he is at the position.
I saw somebody mention in the comments about Tyler Warren being on the board at 19. I've got Tyler Warren going 5th to the Jaguars, and I think he's going to go much closer to that range than anywhere near 19.
Liam Cohen loves him. So
I think that
I love him too. I mean,
if I had to put some money on a Jaguars pick today, I would put money on Tyler Warren.
Yeah. If you give any quarterback an elite tight end, it just makes him better. It just does, right?
There's also if you're the Jaguars, not to get too Jaguar-y about that, but who else on offense in this draft really gets you jacked up if you're Liam Cohen and you're sitting at 5, he's going to be there, assuming the top 4 kind of go chalk. You let Evan Ingram walk, and you're wide open to just plug Tyler Warren right into that role. I think that's a great pick for them.
Yeah, in my mock coming out tomorrow, I thought about that. I didn't know if that was going to be too high for Tyler Warren, though, because is he the 5th best player in the draft? I'm not sure. I actually had them taking Mason Graham just because you've got 2 guys in Liam Cohen and Gladstone, the GM, that were in LA that saw the difference that Aaron Donald can make, and that now you've got, because I think the Jags have literally some Jags in between.
Yes,
Josh Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker, right? If you can get a stud defensive tackle in there, I think it helps your edge. They played much better against the run, and it kind of fixes that defense a little bit more because the Jaguars defense was not what it was the year prior.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if Mason Graham's that guy. I like the idea of the Jags potentially going defense with their first overall pick, Scott, because if you're Liam Cohen, the thing that makes you special is your creativity and your ability to get the most out of an offensive side of the roster. So it would make sense to throw more capital into the defensive side of the ball. This is just me speaking. I don't know if Mason Graham's that guy, a top 5 pick, and especially just, you were talking about being a great run stop. I don't see him as the kind of that. But I think I'm also pretty low, but I also believe that I think he's been slipping a lot. I think a lot of people are kind of coming around and maybe he's not as generational as he was originally billed as.
The big thing for me with that pick in particular is there's a lot of really good interior guys in this draft that I think they could pick at the top of the second and be super happy with.
Yeah.
And I think you can find effective guys at those positions. Whether you need a 3-tech or a nose, it doesn't matter. There's one Tyler Warren in this draft.
That's true.
I think there's a gap between him and Colson Loveland. I like some of the other tight ends there, but if you're telling me you got to get a really dynamic special player, I think Tyler Warren is that guy. I don't necessarily think Mason Graham is that guy. I think he's really good at a lot of things, not elite. That's why I made that flip, and I was like, man, I just think that's a fun pick, and I think I'm going to stick with it for a while.
No, that's interesting. I might steal it from you tomorrow.
Go for it.
You're talking me into it. Josh has already talked me into the fact the 49ers are going to be better than I think they're going to be today in our group chat. So maybe you just convinced me who the 5th overall pick is in the draft. One thing that we do know is Jason Light does a pretty good job at the draft. And if you want to find out who we think he and the Buccaneers may draft, make sure you stay tuned for Thursday night. We've got our next Bucs mock draft show. This is the official Pewter Report 7-round Bucs mock draft. And that will be Thursday night at 8:30 after the mock draft comes out on pewterreport.com at 5 p.m. So we're going to be in Orlando. Not Orlando. Orlando was last year. We're going to be in West Palm Beach. Good thing I remembered not to drive to Orlando tomorrow. I'm driving to West Palm Beach for the NFL annual meeting. And we'll have Todd Bowles' press conference reaction. Todd will be speaking to the media at 7:45 a.m. on Tuesday morning. We will be there, and Jason Light will speak in the afternoon along with Joel Glazer. So make sure you tune into our show on Tuesday. It'll be our first podcast of the week here on Pewter Report TV at 5 p.m. At that special time, we'll have all of the recap from Bowles, Jason Light, and Joel Glazer as well. And then we will have a podcast on Wednesday and Thursday this week, but no podcast tomorrow. We're driving down to West Palm Beach. I promise I'm not driving to Orlando. West Palm Beach tomorrow. And then so our podcast this week will be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I've got a Buccaneer penciled in for Thursday, a Bucs player. I'm going to wait to confirm that before I throw that out there. I want to make sure that I can put it in pen, but right now it's in pencil. So Thursday will be a very interesting show, and maybe even Wednesday too. I've got a couple of Bucs players that are getting back to me in terms of their availability, but this should be a fun week ahead, even though it's just 3 podcasts. We'll have a Pewter Insider podcast on Friday as well. One other programming note, just wanted to remind you that Briar Greaves Insurance is the place to go for all of your insurance needs. They're my own carrier. I've got Briar Greaves Insurance for all of my automobiles, when I say all mine, I mean my kids, my wife, etc. Not like I've got some collection of
Your
cars
garage full of supercars, Scott.
Yeah, I'm not that kind of guy, but I do have a house, and that also has Briar Greaves insurance as well. And what I love about Briar Greaves is the fact that I have a personal relationship with John Greaves. It's Briar's son, and he gets back to me lickety split, and not just because I'm Scott Reynolds, but because I'm just a Briar Greaves customer, via text, email, phone calls, whatever. There's nothing more frustrating than calling an insurance company and waiting on hold for 15 minutes and talking to somebody that you don't even know, that you don't have a relationship with. Well, the other thing I like about Briar Greaves is they shop around to all of the carriers, all the different insurance companies, and find the company that has the best rate for me when it comes to homeowners, as well as my automobiles. They also do old-time cars, those classic cars, RVs as well, along with boats. So if you have in the need of boater insurance in the state of Florida, Briar Greaves is the place to turn. BriarGreavesInsurance.com, or call them tomorrow at 813-876-4166. Well, guys, this was a fun show. I know we talked about doing another round, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with that round. And I don't know that we'd want to like trade up to 14, or I should say any higher than 14. So I think 14 was a good ceiling for the Bucs to go to. And then if we traded up, just to 16 or something like that, it's just a little bit more incremental than what we did. But I think it was really fun. It was a fun exercise to do too, to see exactly what would happen if the Bucs didn't draft an edge rusher this year, and maybe it turns out okay.
Yeah, I think they did a really great job of kind of at least giving themselves the short-term option. And Hassan Reddick, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with this take, is an upgrade over Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and still gives the team the opportunity to see how Chris Braswell develops. So I think they're okay there for at least another year, and then you've definitely created long-term options at corner, at potentially linebacker as well. I saw that comment too. I'm glad you put it up there, Scott. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff. My pleasure, Ward. Hope you're doing well, buddy.
Yeah. Luke, you were born and raised in the Tampa area?
Yes, absolutely.
So just spend a couple of minutes here. If people aren't familiar with you and your story, how you got involved in the draft and how you got involved in Bucs coverage, and also tell everybody, where they can find you today on X and what you're doing with Athlon Sports.
Yeah, man. I mean, my heart and soul is still in Tampa, man. I was born there, raised there. My parents have ticket stubs from all the old games back in the day. I was the kid growing up in the creamsicle, clothes, while all my front running friends were pretending they were Packers and Broncos and Cowboys and Steelers and Patriots fans and all that. I lived through the hard stuff. I didn't see a Bucs home game on television until I was 12 years old. It was Gene Deckerhoff, and that was it. So I lived that life. You can tell I've got a whole shelf full of everything back here, tons of orange. So, no, man, it's a long story how I got here, but I grew up with parents who supported everything I wanted to do. I played sports, obviously, through high school, played a little bit of college football, but I always knew I wanted to write about this game much longer than I was going to be able to play it. And so when I was like 13 or 14 years old, this is in like the early, 2000, ish range where the internet is first starting to kind of jump on board. So I had, I built a blog that was super ugly and nobody read but my family, and was able to practice and get and to be quite honest, one of the biggest reasons I was able to break into the industry was, I know, Scott, you'll remember Jeff Camus.
Yep.
He was I think Reggie Roberts was in charge at the time of the Bucs communications department, but I was literally just a stupid kid who was like poking around on the Bucs website one day at 14 years old and came across the media section of the website, and it's like, oh, for access to this, call this number. I was like, okay, sure. Right. So I called and I talked to Jeff, and I told him what I was, just a kid trying to, learn how to do it in this business. And he's like, okay, here's, access, which that kind of opened things up for me to have an understanding of the business, and it gave me access to the NFL side of things. So I was working at the Museum of Science and Industry as like a volunteer at 14 years old. I was taking lunch breaks to jump on conference calls with like Peyton Manning and Derek Brooks and Steve McNair and all these guys, like at 15 years old. And so I had so many fun opportunities as a young kid, and just tried to chip away a little bit at a time. I feel like I've had a cup of coffee at just about every media outlet there is. I'm having an absolute blast at Athlon Sports right now, man. I mean, growing up and reading those draft magazines every year as a kid, and now being able to, to see my name in that magazine and be a big part of the team that puts that together is so fun. But the website has exploded. We've got so many great people working on the digital side of things now. So come over to athlonsports.com. I've got a new 4-round mock draft every Thursday morning, full 32 teams, comp picks, everything. I do trades most of the time when I can, when they make sense. I think I've got the Bucs moving down in the last one. Obviously, I'm a little spoiled. I'm always going to look out for the Bucs, but yeah, man, I love Tampa so much. Like I said, we moved up to the Pacific Northwest back last summer. Just an adventure as a family that we've been looking forward to for a long time. But Tampa is always going to be close to my heart, and I'm going to be a Bucs guy unapologetically through and through forever.
That's great stuff. Speaking of Bucs, you'll probably appreciate this comment from Meets McGee to our super chat. Thanks so much. A cardboard cutout of Simeon Rice is better than Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. I think Todd Bowles said it best, Luke and Josh, at the NFL scouting combine when he was asked to kind of put the period or the exclamation point on JTS' career in Tampa. And he said, well, he did everything for us except what we drafted him to do, which was get sacks. So there's that.
That says it. That's about right.
Yep. And then we appreciate the $2 super chat from Geist85.
Yes.
People are sleeping on Sean Dolek. Real quick before we let you go, tell us about the Buffalo linebacker who is feisty and fast on film.
Just plays really damn good football. I don't know what else to tell you. He's definitely a smaller guy. I know why some teams will probably be out on him and think that he's a safety trying to play linebacker, but the film's just really good, man. I don't,
he's a ball magnet.
Opportunistic. Yeah, big play guy, splash play. And for a defense that just cannot take the ball away to save their lives, big fan of Sean Dolek anytime on day 3 for a team like the Bucs. I think he is a very underrated player.
Our last comment is from a guy that Josh and I are very high on, and a guy that Christopher Oxentine is very high on as well. Femi Oladejo, still the guy I want, says Christopher. Your thoughts on him? He's one of several Buccaneer players coming in for an official 30 visit.
Yeah, big fan. Well, again, well-rounded guy, can play the run well enough, but can get after the quarterback, tough, physical, athletic enough. He's one of those guys that as you go down and you check the boxes, you run out of, there's no, what's the glaring flaw here? Again, he's you can find more explosive guys, you can find bigger guys, but can you find that many guys that do everything at a high enough level to where you're really not worried? I think he's definitely on that list. Love him in that third range.
Yeah.
I think you'll both love this. Just going back to Dolak real quick. And again, Brett Coleman, since we brought him up earlier, he pointed out he had 59 run stops last year, right? So a stop for basically the offense is not getting the amount of yardage they want for that particular play. Jeffrey Bassa had 52 tackles last year. So Dolak had more defensive stops than Bassa had total tackles. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a day 3 guy. Where do you think his ceiling is? Where would you feel comfortable taking him, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting into the late 4th, and it depends on how many picks you have and how many needs you have, but if that's the guy you need, I'd start thinking about him in the back half of round 4. I think, again, the film is too good. He just makes too many plays, and he does everything at such a high level. Technically sound guy, doesn't miss a ton of tackles either. And so, I'm having that conversation on the back end of the 4th round.
Yeah, well, the Bucs do need a linebacker or 2. We'll see how many they draft this year and who. We had the Buccaneers picking Barrett Carter in the 4th round from Clemson in our mock draft. We appreciate all of you, Pewter people, for checking us out on this Sunday Pewter Report podcast. It was fun having Luke Easterling on. It's fun to be on with Josh Queipo. And hopefully you had some fun too checking it out. It's also going to be fun because this week coming up, not only do we have Todd Bowles talking to the media on Tuesday and our mock draft coming out on Thursday, but we are 21 subscribers away from hitting 18,000. So all you have to do is hit the subscribe button. It's free. There's no actual cost to it. Just go to our Pewter Report TV YouTube page, hit subscribe, and you can help us get to 18,000, which should happen by Tuesday, our next podcast. So we're hoping that that's the case. So we appreciate everybody for joining us, especially our guest, Luke Easterling. For Josh Queipo, I'm Scott Reynolds, saying we'll see you on Tuesday for our next edition of the Pewter Report.